How can one become the king of a continent? The male protagonist will tell you the answer. First, you must be a salaryman who enjoys the 007 perks. Staying up late to play games is also an essential skill. Then, you'll feel your heart stop. Then, everything goes black, and you collapse at your doorstep. But it's okay. When you open your eyes again, you'll find a dog that can fly, and 2 unfamiliar brands of facial cleanser. Finally, you'll find yourself reincarnated as a noble. 2.5 years have passed in the blink of an eye. The male lead has learned to read and write. He also has a general understanding of the world. The family he's currently in not only rules over but also owns land with around 1,000 people. The house is spacious and bright. He has many maids. He even has a private chef. He can eat whatever he wants. This was something he couldn't even dream of in his past life. But to dominate the continent, just relying on this isn't enough. He needs a powerful cheat code. As the male protagonist enters the training ground, he sees a soldier knocked to the ground by a senior. Although he wants to help, he is currently powerless. But soon, the male protagonist finds his cheat activated. It's an ability called Appraisal, allowing him to observe the abilities others possess. With the help of his abilities, the male protagonist discovered that the soldier named Meyer was not suitable to be a lancer. His attributes were much better suited to being an archer. So, after Meyer was once again driven back, the male protagonist decisively stepped forward and asked him if he could use a bow and arrow. Meyer thought bows and arrows were too lame. If you're a man, you must become a lancer. Although the protagonist can't explain why, he still adheres to the old saying, lancers are always lucky. With the common belief that archers often fail, Meyer successfully picked up a bow and arrow. You don't know until you try. And you'll be surprised when you do. Meyer hit the bullseye with one shot. The surrounding area was filled with coincidental remarks. Let Meyer try again. Next, you can imagine the potential of using archers to hang more bee. Meyer's shots were all on target. Finally, amidst everyone's praise, he specialized in becoming an archer, and he aspired to become a dedicated citizen. But faced with everyone's doubts, how did the male lead know about Meyer's talent? The male lead was speechless for a moment. To avoid revealing his abilities, the male lead claimed it was just his intuition. Fortunately, the soldiers believed him unconditionally. But this ability has a bug. That is, for some reason, he couldn't identify his own talent. When evening came, the matter reached his adoptive father's ears. The protagonist was somewhat afraid. After all, his adoptive father always seemed to be angry. But with the activation of his identification ability, the protagonist discovered that his father was actually a peasant. But he's terrifyingly strong. His martial prowess is as high as 94, and his leadership is an astounding 98. However, the protagonist's father didn't investigate further. He instead told his son to hone his intuition. After all, his son would eventually become a lord. And discovering talent is crucial for a lord. It's one of the most important skills. In the following 2.5 weeks, the male lead continuously studied about this country. He ultimately discovered something unsettling. That is, his future was full of thorns. This was all because the country's government was corrupt. There were peasant rebellions everywhere. The nobles in various regions strengthened their autonomy, but the country does nothing. If this continues, a large-scale war will eventually break out. If he has to lead troops into battle then, and conquer the world, he'll need his own team. Thinking this, the male lead disguised himself. He came to town looking for talented people. With his appraisal ability activated, the abilities of those around him were revealed. But people with exceptional gifts are not easy to find, to the point where, in the end, he suffered eye strain from frequently using his ability. And it was at that moment, that in the shop opposite, a man was pushed out. Judging by his appearance, the protagonist concluded that he wasn't a local, but a Malagasy who had come from the other side of the sea, and most of them were brought here as slaves. Seeing how pitiful he looked, the protagonist immediately approached him with food. Ignoring the whispers around them, he handed the food to the man. As the man took the bread, the protagonist's appraisal ability activated. He didn't know until he looked, and he was shocked by what he saw. The man's name is Liz, and he is only 14 years old. Yet, he possesses 2 A-class abilities and 3 S-class abilities. This made the protagonist smile hard to suppress, even harder than an AK. Before the protagonist could say anything, the man thanked the protagonist's kindness and left hurriedly. The protagonist, of course, wouldn't let him go. He took his short little legs and followed the man into a nearby alley. Without a word, he wanted to make Liz his retainer. This left Liz somewhat dumbfounded. He thought the male lead was playing with him. Then the male lead explained that he was the Lord's son. To add credibility, he showed his family crest. Although he was grateful to the male lead, Liz, using his identity as a Malga, refused him on the grounds that it would cause him trouble. He rejected the male lead. But with such outstanding abilities, how could the male lead let him go? Just as he was thinking how to keep him, the opportunity arose. Gazing at the enormous castle before him, Liz finally believed that the male lead was the Lord's son. But when the male lead told Liz to eat freely, he discovered the maid only gave Liz some simple food, and the butler asked Liz to leave immediately after he finished eating. These are all acts of discrimination against the Malga people, but the male lead didn't care. He directly moved a chair next to Liz. He also gave Liz his own food, and he scolded the maid and the butler. Soon, the Lord Father found out about this, so the two of them were summoned to the study. Father disagreed with a Malga in his household. The male lead told his father that although Liz was a Malga, he possessed exceptional talent, and he absolutely had to take him on. Seeing that his father still refused, so the male lead asked his father to test Liz's abilities. What the male lead didn't expect was that his father actually wanted to have a mock battle with Liz. This left the male lead dumbfounded. After all, Liz is only 14 years old, and his father possesses incredibly strong martial arts skills. It would be very difficult for Liz to win. But his father said he would go easy on him. This gave the protagonist an opportunity. On the way to the training ground, Liz asked his question. Once they reached the training ground, his father explained the rules. As long as Liz could hit him once before the hourglass ran out, he would win. Although Liz tried his best to dodge, his father was simply too strong. Even if he was holding back, the surrounding soldiers couldn't even block a single attack. Liz, who hadn't retreated a single step, earned everyone's admiration. He even forced the father to use his full strength. Liz then looked at the male lead beside him. Remembering the male lead's sincere words to him, Liz also made a certain resolution. Just when everyone thought Liz had failed, the father tilted his head slightly. It turned out that her previous strike had grazed her father's hair. No one expected that Liz had actually passed the test. And the father, as promised, hired Liz as a soldier. As her father left, other soldiers came and showed admiration for Liz. Liz officially became a soldier. To thank the hero, he accepted a job as a servant and became the male protagonist's exclusive valet. But Liz knows that if there is no male protagonist, he will probably die on the streets. After becoming the male protagonist's retainer in just 2.5 months, he became an object of everyone's worship. Not only were his martial arts skills superb, but through continuous learning, he became the most intelligent person in the male lead's household. And now, the empire is on the brink of collapse. The current king is only an 8-year-old child, and real power is held by someone else. The factional strife among the retainers has little effect in controlling the rule of the empire. Rebellions began to erupt frequently throughout the land. The governors of various provinces ignored the empire and began to strengthen their autonomy. The flames of war were still small then, but if this continued, a much larger war would inevitably erupt in the future. Although a war between the states is still far off, the state where the protagonist's family lives already shows clear signs of war. This is because the current governor is old and in poor health. He's very likely to die within 2.5 years. The governor has 2 sons. Logically, the eldest son should succeed him, but it just so happens that the second son is more capable. If he were to die before the succession was decided, it would certainly trigger a war. But even if the succession were decided, there would still be a war because both brothers want to be governor. A war would break out. But because he's not a direct subordinate of the governor, the protagonist's father can't unilaterally decide which side to take. He is very likely to end up as cannon fodder. But on the other hand, this is also an opportunity. As long as he performs well in the Great War, he can get promoted and survive. Therefore, he need to find more fighting power. Then he'll go out to find talent. When he went out, he saw his father practicing swordsmanship. Father told the protagonist to find someone skilled in magic. Magic will be the key to future wars. It's a power that can change the tide of battle. Hearing about magic, the protagonist remembered a time he'd used it himself. There are beads with red liquid on the strange props and then recite a short spell. The power back then was earth-shattering. After that awesome feat, the male lead never used magic again. After running with Liz for 2.5 hours, they arrived at a city. According to Liz's intel, this is a large city with a population of 50,000. So many people. He didn't believe he couldn't find someone capable. Ideals are full but reality is harsh. With the appraisal skill activated, he looked around and saw not a single A rank. Combat power was barely over 10 points per person. This disheartened the male protagonist. After all, he could see the numerical values of abilities and aptitudes. Ability is the product of numerical value and aptitude. In other words, no matter how high the numerical ability value is, without aptitude, it cannot be utilized. However, fate is unpredictable. Just as the male lead was about to buy lunch, a figure flashed past him. Only after he reacted did he realize his wallet had been stolen. Liz immediately picked up the male lead and chased after the thief. Although the thief was very fast, Liz, after 2.5 months of training, was a different person now. Even holding a man, he quickly ripped off his cloak. But after pulling it back, they discovered the person underneath was a blue-haired girl. This shocked the man. Soon, the two of them chased into a small alley. However, what they didn't expect was that 3 thugs were already lying in wait. Their leader, Surdy, didn't hesitate and slapped the girl hard across the face. He sent her flying 2.5 meters. Seeing the girl being hit, the male lead intervened. "A little punk like you dares to meddle?" The leader punched him. After chasing away the thugs, the male lead wanted to check on the girl's injuries, but he shouldn't have looked. That look shocked him for 2.5 years. The girl's name was Charlotte. Not only possessing strong military prowess and leadership, her aptitude for magic is even as high as S-class. Despite being only 11 years old and still growing, her military prowess is comparable to his father's. In magic, she possesses overwhelming power. Seeing this, the male protagonist involuntarily uttered his catchphrase. Charlotte hated nobles more than anything. She didn't want to cooperate with the self-righteous nobles. She then returned the protagonist's wallet, but the protagonist noticed a wound on the girl's arm. According to Charlotte, the 3 thugs were working for a slave trader. She had snuck into the noble's food warehouse and been discovered. They were going to sell her to a slave trader. Charlotte seized the opportunity to escape, but her 3 foolish henchmen gave chase. Perhaps they thought she'd fetch a high price. Before the protagonist could ask further, a group of children ran over. It turned out they were all orphans, like Charlotte, living in this alleyway. They usually relied on Charlotte's help. They can only barely make ends meet. Charlotte can't leave them alone. Looking at the children surrounding Charlotte, the male protagonist abandoned the idea of taking Charlotte away. He then handed his wallet to Charlotte. That evening, the male protagonist and Liz discussed what they had seen that day. But then he saw the children from heaven. Just a short while ago, Charlotte was brought back to the slave trader's territory. To punish Charlotte for running away, the thugs beat and kicked Charlotte. But Charlotte didn't react at all, until one of the thugs saw Charlotte's purse, and prepared to take it for himself. Charlotte suddenly grabbed her purse and ran. But as a little girl, how could she possibly escape the thugs? Thinking of the children around her, Charlotte felt desperate. The slave trader didn't understand what Charlotte could possibly do going back. She would only live a life of garbage. Your life is over. Blame your parents for abandoning you. At this moment, the room's door was smashed. The male lead and Liz arrived here. The awesome male lead also arrived beside Charlotte. He began questioning. The man with the handlebar mustache wasn't happy with this little brat who destroyed his door. He was rather annoyed. The male lead used his ability to call out the man with the handlebar mustache's name. Handlebar mustache doesn't know how the male lead knows his name. Judging by his attire, the young man before him should be a nobleman. The male lead asks Handlebar Mustache to release Charlotte. But as a businessman, how could Handlebar Mustache possibly agree? Charlotte doesn't want the male lead to get into trouble because of her. After all, they had only just met. The male lead looked at Charlotte, silent for 2.5 seconds. He told Charlotte, "From the moment I saw you, I've been very concerned. Why do you have that vacant look in your eyes?" He had been thinking about it. Just now, he suddenly found the answer. Charlotte, despite having S-class magical aptitude, only has 1 point in ambition. The man with the handlebar mustache doesn't understand what he's saying. And so-called ambition is a secretly held wish. That wish can sometimes be betrayed, and it can also become a threat. But it's also a desire to become better. I don't want to give up hope for the future. But Charlotte has only given up on the future. The man with the handlebar mustache looks disdainful. Slaves don't have a future. That's only natural. But the male protagonist disagrees. She listens to the male protagonist arguing for herself. Charlotte couldn't remember the last time she cried. Back then, even crying didn't help her, let alone help her survive. From then on, she no longer had beautiful fantasies. Because from the moment she was born, fate is already decided. Whether it's a cold stare, abuse, or violence, as long as she closes her heart, she won't get hurt. People who cry are weak. If you're too weak, you'll die. She has made up my mind. She has to find a way to live strong. But now, Charlotte didn't know why she was crying. At this time, the man with the handlebar mustache also lost his patience. Originally, out of consideration for the male lead being a nobleman, he intended to kindly persuade him to leave. But since he wouldn't listen to high advice and made him lose his patience, then don't blame him for being impolite. Charlotte told the male lead to leave quickly, but a few punks were nothing to the male lead. It's because the male lead has Liz, his super bodyguard. A reckless punk charged forward, but the next second, his feet left the ground. Liz took him down with one hand. Seeing this, the others quickly combined their magic. But that level of magic couldn't possibly harm Liz. In less than 2.5 seconds, except for the man with the handlebar mustache, Liz had eliminated everyone else. Seeing this, the man with the handlebar mustache quickly called for his strongest fighter. The opponent had a tall and strong build. His mere presence intimidated Charlotte. Charlotte told the main character, the bald man is very difficult to deal with. But the male lead has appraisal skills. To the male lead, the bald man in front of him is simply a baby without clothes. The other party is also simple-minded. Liz provoked the bald man with just a few words. The man with the mustache is furious, gnashing his teeth. The boy said he could pay to buy Charlotte. Although the man with the mustache is reluctant. But after witnessing Liz's power, he also knows his own strength is insufficient. Plus, Liz's way of giving a slap followed by a sweet treat, he had no choice but to agree. Then the male lead left with Charlotte. But before going home with the male lead, Charlotte wanted to take the male lead to her secret base. What the male lead didn't expect was, Charlotte's secret base is so far away. He is almost out of breath. After 2.5 hours, they arrived at the secret base. A beautiful scene met their eyes. Every time she sees this view, Charlotte feels that the worries she had in town are insignificant. So Charlotte occasionally comes here. She stares at the scenery, lost in thought. The male lead doesn't understand why Charlotte is telling him all this. Charlotte doesn't answer. She just asks the male lead a question. Don't look down at him, he's a child now. But in his past life, when he was suffering or tired, just seeing a child smile is encouraging. That's because a child's smile is full of hope. And having been in this world for 2.5 years, after having met all kinds of people, the male protagonist understands that hope represents an expectation of the possibilities of the future. This expectation holds immense power. It will encourage people. This vitality will also make the city better. To achieve the goal, the male lead wants to create a home where children can always hold on to hope. This is also what the male lead considers the mission of a city ruler. After hearing the male lead's words, Charlotte readily agreed to the male lead's invitation. Although he can't bear to leave those children, but to let the children live the kind of future the male lead spoke of, she must go. Liz also took out a necklace, a magical item. Wearing it allows one to unleash magic. As long as Charlotte's abilities are confirmed, he would treat her as a partner. The male lead also wanted to see how strong someone with S-class magical aptitude was. And Charlotte, casting a spell for the first time, with curiosity and anticipation, slowly extended 5 fingers towards the sky. Seeing that she could use such powerful magic, Charlotte felt both excited and proud. Upon receiving the male lead's assurance that he would take care of the children, Charlotte hesitated no longer. Kneeling before him, she said, "To realize your dream I will do my utmost." After bidding farewell to the children, he brought Charlotte home. But her father disapproved. He believed it was too dangerous for a woman to go to war. 3 years after accepting Charlotte. Just as Liz said, wars are breaking out everywhere. The province where the male lead lives is also caught in territorial disputes. Because of this, his father has led troops to war several times. Each time, he was victorious. And this is largely thanks to Charlotte. Charlotte, who came to the male lead's family 3 years ago, has become a reliable older sister. This older sister appeared on the battlefield like a comet. After many campaigns, she commanded the strongest magical troops, inspiring awe in everyone. She even earned the title of Flame Princess. Now, she's the head of the family's magical forces, standing shoulder to shoulder with the infantry led by her father, becoming 2 of the greatest pillars of the family. This made him realize the importance of talent. It further strengthened his resolve to find talented people. In addition, he also gained a pair of twin siblings. In his opinion, the 2 would definitely become the pillars of the family in the future. Liz also brought good news. A hunter family had moved here. The 2 brothers in the family were not only tall and strong, but also very capable. It also has a good reputation. The male lead immediately sets off. Charlotte, having nothing better to do, acts as a bodyguard. He travels with the male lead. After 2.5 hours of mental and physical torment, the 3, including the male lead, discovered 2 brothers hunting. Then, the male lead used his ability to observe them. After confirming that their stats were fine, he went to their house on the pretext of having something to ask. After a warm reception, the old man learned that the main character was the Lord's son and intended to take his 2 sons as retainers. The old man was very happy. Afterwards, the 2 talked very happily. The main character also learned that the old man had a 3rd son, but this son was unlike his 2 brothers. He was a clumsy child. And it was at this moment that the male lead discovered the child who had secretly taken the bread. Just as the old man was scolding his son for being disobedient, out of curiosity, the male lead activated his appraisal skill to check. This look revealed something unexpected. The boy not only possessed several A-level talents, but the Navy's strategy was truly superb. But upon seeing the boy's intelligence cap of 109, the male lead literally vomited 2.5 liters of blood. You see, for the average person, reaching 50 in their lifetime is already something to be incredibly grateful for. The boy before him was practically a monster. Although, due to his age, all his ability values were still very low. but as long as he cultivate him well, he will certainly become an excellent retainer. Based on the principle of slow and steady wins the race, the male lead immediately decided to take him as a retainer. The old man was baffled. In his own home, his youngest son, Roselle, was known to be stupid, but the male lead, possessing HR superpowers, didn't care about such things. He insisted on accepting Roselle, but this scared Roselle into tears. Because becoming a retainer meant going to war, and war meant facing unforeseen dangers. He realized the three people before him weren't good people. Thinking this, Roselle ran back to his room crying. The old man quickly explained the situation. Compared to his two older brothers, Roselle was both thin and timid. After his mother passed away 2 years ago, he often shut himself in his room. The son of a hunter, at his age he should have been practicing chopping wood and archery. But now, let alone going to the battlefield, even stepping on an ant is difficult for him. But the male lead ignores all that. There's a saying, strategists don't go to the battlefield, unless they're lovesick. So the male lead plans to invite Roselle again. That is, after opening the door, he thought Roselle would be crying. But the male lead didn't expect her to be reading here. The male lead asks Roselle if he likes reading. That book is the only book in Roselle's house. It's one his mother used to read to him. Although he's not good at anything, he can forget all his worries when he reads. The male lead gets an idea. He invites Roselle to his library. It's big and comfortable, and he wanted to see whatever books there were. Faced with such temptation, Roselle couldn't resist. Although he had been scared to tears by the male lead's dog when entering the house, but once he arrived at the library, he was captivated by the books. He didn't even hear what the male lead was saying. Because he still had to study, after entrusting Roselle to Liz's care, the male lead left. 2.5 hours later, the male lead, having studied excessively, immediately came to the library, only to find that Roselle had fallen asleep. He learned from Liz that Roselle not only didn't know any characters, but could remember them as soon as they were taught, and could even make associations, and delve deeper into his meaning. For these, the male lead didn't listen. Instead, he was shocked by Roselle's ever-increasing intelligence. It was at this time that his two older brothers came to take Roselle home. Seeing his younger brother asleep, the brothers blurted it out. Even though he can't even read, he still finds reading interesting. This shocked the male lead even more. Only his deceased mother was literate in the family. But hunters don't need that skill. So, they didn't teach him to read at home. Before the male lead could say more, Roselle woke up. Seeing this, the male lead asked Roselle how he learned to read. The answer he received was even more unbelievable. It turned out that Roselle recalled a scene from his childhood, his mother reading to him. He compared the words he heard with the words in the book, and then he understood. Even his brothers couldn't believe it. At that time, Roselle was only 3 years old. But Roselle remembers almost everything that happened after he was born. This left the few people present speechless. The male lead also made up his mind that he couldn't let Roselle's talent go to waste. But the current situation was how to explain it so that the hunter's family would believe him. How to explain it in a way that the hunter family would believe. Liz has an idea about this. That is, to let the hunter family know that there are ways to hunt besides archery. Perhaps this will give Roselle confidence. On day 2, the protagonist then had Roselle hunt by setting traps. But his two older brothers were very puzzled by this. They firmly believed that using bows and arrows was the fastest option. But the main character still encouraged Roselle. Sometimes, weapons aren't just about strength and physical power. The mind is also a weapon. As long as he successfully hunts using traps, his father will surely see him in a new light. Although he was still a little unsure, he was encouraged by his two older brothers. Roselle decided to give it a try anyway. Soon, the old man was astonished by what he saw. There were many bristly pigs inside. These were all caught in traps Roselle had made himself. He'd learned about this method from a book. Bristly pigs have a habit of hoarding yellow objects. So he'd made fences painted yellow. This ensured the bristly pigs could only enter, not leave. To protect the piglets and the sows, Roselle also placed herbs around. This left the old man completely dumbfounded. Even if the piglets ran in, Roselle made small holes allowing the piglets to escape safely, thus achieving the effect of sustainable protection of the ecosystem. The old man was quite shocked. Looking at this trap, plus the persuasion of his two older brothers, the old man finally agreed to let Roselle become the male lead's retainer. Although he was a little reluctant, but after the male lead guaranteed he wouldn't be sent to the battlefield, Roselle finally agreed. Thus, the male lead's initial lineup was complete. The male lead never expected that his gravely ill father would tell him he had a fiancée. This left the male lead, who had been in this other world for 4.5 years, completely dumbfounded. Although his father couldn't remember when he decided, he still told the male lead that his fiancée had sent him a letter. This left the male lead even more baffled. After all, he hadn't even had a girlfriend in his past life. He simply didn't know how to act. More importantly, he simply didn't know what this fiancé he'd never met was actually like. But one look, and it didn't matter. The other person's appearance was surprisingly cute and charming. The male lead's speech became somewhat incoherent, but after activating his skill, seeing this girl named Ligia, he found she surprisingly had 100 points in politics and 80 points in ambition. The male lead, who had originally thought himself lucky, instantly displayed a wide range of facial expressions. He felt that the other party had come with malicious intent. The other party is most likely using their cute appearance to pretend to be well-behaved, making a good impression on him, then seizing the opportunity to occupy his territory. Thinking about this, the male lead felt completely distraught. At this time, Licia's butler discovered Liz, questioning why a lowly Malga was here, but was scolded by Licia. Because Ligia not only knew that Liz was the male lead's retainer, but also spoke highly of Liz's glorious achievements on the battlefield, praising them endlessly. She made the butler apologize for his rude behavior. Ligia's attitude completely caught the male lead off guard. She didn't show any prejudice against Liz because of her own status, not at all. She doesn't have the spoiled personality of other noble young ladies. Instead, she shows respect for everyone. For everyone. She is polite and courteous to all. Seeing her demeanor, the male lead became even more convinced of his earlier guess. Although it was their first meeting, the male lead, whose social skills are zero, is chatting with Licia, which made him very happy. Licia is not only good at socializing, she's quick-witted, graceful, and more importantly, incredibly charming. If he didn't have his appraisal ability, he'd probably fall for her instantly. During their chat, Licia mentioned wanting to visit the city, although the male lead wanted to take her to see it, but the weather wasn't cooperating. It was raining outside. The male lead exclaimed, "Amazing. Could it be that Licia has the ability to control the weather?" But in fact, Licia is simply good at observation. She had already observed the movement of the clouds in the carriage, knowing it will clear up soon. Meanwhile, two onlookers are hiding outside the door. As they are walking down the street, residents ask about such a lovely girl. The male lead introduces her as his fiancée. Seeing Ligia respond politely, the residents plan to spread the good news to celebrate. But the male lead can't explain his predicament. It's because he can't tell everyone. This might be a crisis for our territory. Just then, an argument could be heard in the distance. The male lead quickly went to investigate. It turned out to be a dispute among merchants. The craftsman had ordered flame magic stones, but the supplier delivered sound magic stones instead. Because it was a verbal agreement, this is what happened. As the next lord, he should try to calm things down. But if the mediation fails, Ligia will definitely mock him. But Ligia suddenly said, she'll handle this herself. If she can resolve this smoothly, she hopes the male lead will grant her one request. Seeing that the two were about to fight, Ligia stepped forward with a smile, diffusing the situation with a few words. Then she introduced herself as a member of the Robert family, the next lord's fiancée. The two instantly abandoned their fight. Ligia also made a suggestion. She was willing to buy them at a high price. As for flame magic stones, her territory's volcano produces a large quantity. So we can sell it cheaply to the craftsman. That solves the problem. But unexpectedly, Licia actually attributed this solution to the male lead. Neither of them could believe it. That the male lead would even help with such a petty problem of such common people. The male lead could only awkwardly smile. After everyone had dispersed, the male lead couldn't help but sigh. Licia's political maneuvering was truly impressive. On the way back, Licia also made her request. He thought Licia would confess, but unexpectedly, Licia simply replied, "I understand." I'll take that as a reference. Seeing Licia's so unmoved expression, the male lead was even more puzzled. That evening, a grand banquet was held at his home, complete with an exciting magic show. Since Licia decided to stay overnight, the male lead, still not understanding her, he decided to try again tomorrow. But the next second, he didn't expect Licia actually climbed onto his bed. This made the male lead's eyes widen. Luckily, Licia covered the man's mouth so as not to alarm anyone else. The man thought it was the wrong room. But this was Licia's little surprise. Only because she wanted to see the male lead's surprised expression. Luckily, it was just a joke. The real reason is the male lead had said he liked girls who could have heart-to-heart talks. So she wanted to have a good chat with him. But what the male lead didn't expect was that Licia actually possessed the ability to read people's expressions just by looking at them. Even if the other party wants to hide it, she has the ability to know the other party's emotions. Therefore, when the male lead first saw her, the emotion he showed was suspicion. Because it was their first meeting, there was nothing strange about it. Licia is confident that after just 2.5 minutes of conversation, the male lead will lower his guard to a certain extent. But in the end, the male lead's self-doubt only grew stronger. He even said he wanted to hear her own honest thoughts. This left Licia very puzzled. What exactly was the male lead doubting about herself? Perhaps it was because Licia was so perceptive. That's what made her feel so uneasy. So, the male lead also decided to voice his own speculation about others' abilities, her qualifications and ambitious capabilities. Because from the male lead's perspective, Ligia possesses very high political talent and ambition far surpassing others. Therefore, he himself doubts all of Ligia's actions, wondering if they were premeditated, or for some other purpose. Ligia's doubts are finally resolved. She didn't doubt the male lead's words at all, because she herself possessed ambition. But then again, as the Lord's daughter, marrying a powerful man was indeed the best way to survive. But, becoming the fiancée of a nobleman from such a weak territory, he wonder what Ligia will think. And at this moment, Ligia became excited. This was the first time she had seen through the male lead's thoughts. The Robent family's territory is indeed small. If her fiancé were an insignificant person, she would have done anything to break the engagement. But after spending a whole day with him, she changed her mind. Because in Ligia's eyes, the male lead is very talented, and is truly loved by the people of the territory. When she introduced herself as his fiancée, everyone was as happy as if it were their own affair. This made Ligia see that she could be loved for her true self without resorting to scheming. This is an irreplaceable ability as a lord. Since sending Ligia away, the two began exchanging letters. The male lead also decided to tell Ligia next time they meet that he wants to be with her. Just when the male lead thought that a peaceful life would continue, his father's condition suddenly worsened. He doesn't have much time left. Though he knew this day would come eventually, he still prayed for more time, to repay his father. But then, one blow after another, news of the governor's assassination spread. The entire state plunged into chaos and panic. The war of succession between brothers is about to begin. Their father is currently unable to take charge. The protagonist now shoulders the responsibility. He prepares to go to Canar City in his father's place to attend the pre-war meeting. Upon arriving at Canar City, although the protagonist presented the letter, the guards didn't believe this child before them. Until he saw Charlotte and Liz behind the main character, the guard hurriedly led the three into the castle. The three were greeted by a retainer of the Count of Rummel. Renard, the main character, activated his appraisal skill. Although Renard doesn't have any outstanding attributes, but his average ability values are very high. He is an all-rounder capable of doing anything. This is a comparison. The male lead only then realized how capable Charlotte and Liz were. Then the three of them entered the conference room. The male lead, with a burst of energy, began introducing himself to the other lords. But the conference room was surprisingly quiet. No one responded. He felt a wave of disappointment. Was it because he was a child? That made him seem suspicious? Suddenly, the male lead felt a shocking aura. One of the lords was staring intently at him. Before he could speak, footsteps were heard outside the hall. He watched the other lord stand up. Although he didn't understand the situation, he figured following along was the right thing to do. Then, the Count of Rummel entered the meeting room. Then, he expressed his gratitude to everyone for coming. The male lead activated his appraisal skill. He discovered that not only was Rummel's bravery exceptionally high, but his other abilities were also quite average. Furthermore, the areas where Count Rummel's abilities were lacking, namely weaponry, complemented his retainer Reinhardt's strengths perfectly. With Renard's archery skills being average, as long as the two were together, the judgments made by the Count would be unlikely to go far wrong. The meeting will now begin. Rummel told everyone that the governor's assassination will inevitably trigger a war. When the succession struggle begins, the county of Canar will follow Lord Colin, his brother. Besides that, the state of Sez might seize the opportunity to attack Canar County. Please prepare themselves for the incoming war. Waiting for the meeting to end. The male lead was completely exhausted. Suddenly, the stern lord who had been glaring at the male lead took the initiative to greet him. He also introduced himself, saying his name was Hammond. The male lead never expected that Lord Hammond, this stern man, was actually Ligia's father. The male lead was scared out of his wits. Hammond told the protagonist that his daughter had been in a bad mood lately, seemingly unhappy about his letters. The protagonist then recalled that when he was about to reply his father had fallen ill, and the governor had been assassinated, so he hadn't written back to Ligia for a while. The male lead quickly said he would make up for it as soon as he got back. Hammond said, his daughter usually doesn't show her emotions. Her behavior and manners are impeccable, yet now she's openly expressing her displeasure. It seems she quite likes the male lead. Ligia has been intelligent since she was a child. And she's very sensible. He generally leaves her alone, taking advantage of this. He prioritizes his work and the war, leaving her quite lonely. The ugly disputes among the nobles within his territory might bring back bad memories for her, so he hopes Ligia will be happy. Hammond knows, the male lead's father was a brave and strong warrior. If it were his son, someone he could feel comfortable entrusting his daughter to, then he would have arranged this marriage. Watching Hammond leave, the male lead had thought he was a terrifying person, but now it seems he is a soft person. When the male lead returned home, First, he explained the meeting's spirit to his father. Then he replied to Lisha. The next day, he felt extremely anxious. He kept training, wanting to become stronger. Although he was knocked down again and again, he kept getting up and continuing his practice. He wouldn't rest at all. He thought everyone was training hard, getting stronger and stronger, but he hasn't made any progress at all. He once led the soldiers in a simulated battle, but the results were completely unsatisfactory. He knows deep down that no matter how many military books he has read, his practical experience is overwhelmingly lacking. Worse still, facing the soldiers who seriously attacked him, he'll unconsciously be afraid. Even on the battlefield, Liz and Charlotte will certainly assist him, but he can't stand tall and proud on the battlefield. It will make everyone uneasy. If that's the case, even if everyone's skills are stronger, it's meaningless if their leader is unreliable. However, he is unable to do it. Just then, Roselle brought bad news. The Sez state has sent troops to attack the Cumers territory, Rumor County. The governor's letter demands that the male protagonist's family immediately send troops. Because Cumers territory has been conquered, Sez state, they will definitely attack the smaller Robent family. His father's health prevents him from going to war. This means it's really time for the male lead to go to war. Although fear and anxiety have overwhelmed him, he still decides to lead the troops to war and asks Liz to gather everyone. She noticed his anxiety. Liz gave the male lead unwavering confidence. Just as the male lead was announcing to the soldiers that he would lead them into battle, he was firmly stopped by his father. He couldn't let the current male lead go to war. This time, he would lead the troops himself. The male lead worried about his father's current physical condition, but his father said, if it's to protect Canar County and the family lands, would willingly die. The male protagonist cannot understand. Although he is weak now, he has Liz and Charlotte's help. He will surely win. But his father says the problem isn't that. It's simply because the current male protagonist doesn't have the expression a warrior should have. The main character doesn't understand. What expression should a warrior have? The father sends a soldier to the dungeon to bring a prisoner. He plans to let the main character witness the prisoner's execution, and tells the main character, if he can remain impassive after seeing this man die, then he will acknowledge him as a man capable of standing on his own 2 feet, and let the male lead command this battle. The uneasy male lead watches from the sidelines. As his father orders the execution of the prisoner, the high axe falls, making the male lead's heart race. Watching the prisoner's decapitated neck, the bloody scene makes him vomit uncontrollably. His father comforts the male lead. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Everyone starts out like this. I was the same in the past. On the battlefield, you constantly witness people dying. I can't let someone who wavers at this level command battles on the front lines. After saying that, he left with his soldiers. After everyone dispersed, suddenly, it started to rain. The rain seemed to reflect the male protagonist's inner world, gloomy and heavy. Upon reaching the battlefield, the once crybaby transformed into a strategic genius. Charlotte transformed into a magically superb flame princess. The former slave also became the Reaper of Robent. With the help of several people, only then, in the early stages of the war, could he defeat an enemy 1.5 times bigger than his size, and successfully capture their fortress. After defeating the enemy forces in a month-long campaign, his father, due to excessive exertion, fell into a coma as soon as the war ended. Looking at his father lying comatose in bed, the protagonist was overcome with self-reproach. He feels so useless. That's why father had to personally lead the troops into battle. To make up for his guilt, the male lead trains intensely every day, selflessly honing his skills, hoping to become stronger through hard work. And it was at this time that Ligia paid a late-night visit. This surprised the 3 Liz people. They didn't know why she visited late at night. Ligia was very worried about the male lead. They had corresponded regularly. The male lead's letters were always warm and sincere. But since the war began, the content of the letters had changed. Although there wasn't much difference on the surface, but he seems distracted. Or rather, he's acting unusually. She can't sense his emotions at all. Ligia feels something must have happened. After learning the reason from Liz, Ligia also felt guilty. As his fiancée, she couldn't help him when he was suffering. By the time Ligia arrived at the training ground, she saw the male lead knocked to the ground, but he still insisted on not resting. His father, despite his frail body, was able to fight bravely, and he wanted to obtain the strength to protect everyone as well. The male lead now had only one belief, that he must become stronger. This left Ligia feeling rather uncomfortable, but she didn't disturb the male lead. She felt it wasn't the right time to disturb him. At this moment, the maid rushed over in a panic, saying that the Lord had woken up. Roselle wanted to tell the male lead the good news, but the maid said that the Lord had something to say to the 3 of them first. What surprised the 3 of them was, the Lord, so imposing on the battlefield, would be the first to thank them. However, the Lord summoned the 3 of them this time to tell them something. He knew his time was short, so he wanted to clarify some things now. When the male lead brought the three back, he himself found it absurd. Liz is a Malgon. Charlotte is a woman. As for Roselle, he's only 5 years old. But none of that matters now. Now, the three of them have become the pillars supporting the entire territory. The Lord is grateful that they came to the Robert family and is proud of them. Now he wants to ask the three of them about the male lead. The male lead is not yet strong enough for the battlefield. Temporarily inheriting the Lord's position must be incredibly difficult. His own death is approaching. Only now realizing there are so many things he hasn't done. He regrets not sending the male lead to the battlefield, while he could still personally protect him. He taught him about the cruelty of this world, but now he can no longer do so himself. The male lead is gentle, beloved by the people, and has the ability to recognize talent. He is his son, his pride. Now he can only ask the three of them to support the male lead, to help him overcome this crisis. This isn't a Lord's command, but a father's plea. Roselle said excitedly, if it weren't for the protagonist's help, I wouldn't be able to understand my family. He gave me confidence. I will study hard to repay him and become his strength. Charlotte may not understand the affairs of the territory, but the future the male lead painted is what she desires in her heart. It is the male lead who gave her life meaning. Even if you, my lord, don't say it, I don't intend to serve anyone but him. Liz said firmly, if anyone dares to obstruct the male lead, before the last person remains, I will fight to the end. Even if it costs me my life, I will protect the male lead's safety. The three of them were also grateful to the Lord for taking them in and treating them equally. Afterwards, the Lord summoned Lisha and told Lisha that the engagement was proposed by himself. When he first met Lisha, although he thought she was a little too mature, he quickly discovered that Lisha was incredibly gentle. At that time, he hoped that someone like Lisha could be by the male lead side. The Lord also knew that the Robert family's territory was small, and the male lead might not be reliable. He worried that Lisha wouldn't accept this engagement. Lisha also honestly expressed her feelings. The male lead might be a little soft-hearted because he's too gentle, but to get closer to his father, he's working hard to overcome this. She genuinely likes the male lead too. The Lord was very pleased to hear this. Finally, the Lord summoned his beloved son. Looking at his son before him, he recalled when he was about the same age. He resolved to become a warrior. He was born in a remote village. The Lord there was greedy and cruel. The people were forced to live in poverty. Unable to bear such a life, he ran away from home at the age of 10. He came to the town, and witnessed the governor's majestic and imposing figure. Deeply moved, he longed to become a leader who could command soldiers. Later, he learned swordsmanship by himself, a loyal soldier, fought hard and earned merit, and was promoted by Lord Rummel. When he came to his senses, he had already become a lord. Retainers, people and his family. Everything about Robert is his own treasure. He considers protecting them is his life's mission. If he's tired, his physical state is not the male lead's responsibility. It's his chosen way of life. So the male lead doesn't need to feel guilty at all. Then father and son had a heart-to-heart talk. They spent a warm and profound night. However, his father passed away the next day. Though the protagonist was heartbroken, he knew he had to be strong. He remembered his father's last words. For the sake of his retainers, the people, and Robert family, he had to protect this land and everyone on it. 3 months had passed since his father's death. The male lead returned to Canale City for a meeting, but he seemed to have matured significantly overnight. Although he was still in the same place, and with the same people at the meeting, the male lead's demeanor had undergone a dramatic change. This time, he was no longer the nervous and anxious boy. He had become incredibly firm and confident. Then he introduced himself as the new lord in a strong and resonant voice. Although he is unlearned and of little knowledge, he would strive to do his job well. These words moved everyone present. They highly praised the male lead. At the meeting, the Earl of Rummel mentioned the dispute over the governorship succession. Originally the eldest son, Karan, and the second son, Mark, are in a state of truce. But now Karan has decided to take up arms. This means war is about to begin. Then, Renard explains the details to everyone. The second son, Mark, occupies the capital of Mysian state. Therefore, he controls more troops and resources. Meanwhile, the eldest son, Karan, rules St. Pra, a trading city. His economic strength is dominant. Both sides are evenly matched. Therefore, the stance of the nearby counties will greatly influence the final outcome. Among the numerous counties to the west, only Parina County has not yet been won over. Geographically speaking, although Parina County's territory is small and its military forces are limited, but its geographical location is extremely important. It's the only way to the capital. Failing to take it will affect the establishment of an effective supply line on the front lines. Before the full-scale war breaks out, we must find a way to settle this. Although I want a peaceful resolution, to avoid unnecessary conflict, but if they insist on refusing, we can only send troops to occupy it. Just then, the male lead volunteered to try to win over the Purina County. He felt that Purina County was clearly surrounded by the enemy but still refused to be won over. There must be something fishy going on. If we can figure out the underlying reason, we might find some common ground for negotiation. The county sheriff, Rummel, looked at the male protagonist, at his confident expression, and agreed to his proposal. It turned out that before the meeting, several days prior, in his office, Rossel had already sensed something amiss, and anticipated Rummel's proposal at the meeting. Send troops to occupy Purina County. But given the current unclear situation, a rash attack might meet with heavy counterattack. Rossel believes we must first grasp the overall situation. Liz suggested hiring mercenaries to gather intelligence. He knows of a mercenary group called Shadows who are very skilled at gathering intelligence, both capable and competent. No matter the circumstances, gathering intelligence first is never wrong. If the meeting's contents are as Rossel predicted, then the male lead will propose handling it himself. After the meeting, the male lead and a few others went to the orphanage they built. To care for those who once lived with Charlotte in the alley as orphans, he also searched for some helpless children, and do his best to bring them back and settle them. Now, some of them have grown up, each cherishing their own ideals, and they are all deeply grateful to the male lead, because the male lead changed the course of their lives. Of course, Charlotte also deserves credit for this. She donated all his salary to the orphanage. Just then, Lisha suddenly appeared. She followed his father to Canar City. She heard the male lead came here, so she wanted to see him. The man was surprised by his fiancée's sudden appearance. But he was also a little worried, because he had nothing to offer her here. But Ligia didn't mind. She saw the innocent smiles on the children's faces and was touched by them. He is always surrounded by happiness. This is exactly what she's always been pursuing. Then a child ran up and asked for a hug, and soiled Lisha's clothes. The male lead was extremely flustered, but Lisha didn't get angry. Instead, she took off her shoes. Then she smiled gently. Without hesitation, she joined the children's game. The male lead was also attracted by Lisha's gentleness. That evening, Lisha wanted to stay the night and hoped to go with the male lead to meet Shadow tomorrow. Although the male lead wanted to refuse, citing danger, but Lisha had already had the butler put her luggage away, then she went back. Looking at Lisha's pitiful appearance, the male lead had no choice but to agree. But he never expected, Lisha wanted to sleep in the same room as him. Unfortunately, Charlotte, who had just fallen asleep, suddenly woke up. When Liz opened the door to report, he saw something he shouldn't have. Soon, they set off to meet the Shadow mercenary group. On the road, Liz informed the male lead that the Shadow organization mainly collects intelligence and negotiates privately. Sometimes they also take assassination missions. Although it's dangerous sometimes, there's one thing that concerns Liz. The Shadow organization has a new leader. The current leader is very young, and he's very capable. He's made Shadow a more powerful organization than before. This should be good news. But the new leader only accepts commissions he likes. Even if you increase the commission fee, he still only acts according to his own preferences. This makes the male protagonist worried about this trip and he can't help but feel concerned. Soon, they arrived at a tavern. A burly man told them it was full for the day. No room. This left the protagonist at a loss. Then, Liz simply exchanged a few words with the burly man. Several seats were immediately vacated in the tavern, but those around him kept glancing at the protagonist. This made the male lead a little flustered. Charlotte had intended to set fire to the place. At this time, a waiter came forward to take their order. The male lead inadvertently activated his appraisal skill, but he was startled. Then he found an excuse to go to the restroom. He thought it was a problem with his appraisal skill. But then, the male lead secretly glanced at Liz's stats. He found that the appraisal skill wasn't the problem. That's strange. Someone with bravery 92 and intelligence 90 shouldn't be a waiter, and she's only 22 years old. Just at that critical moment, the throwing knife suddenly appeared. Liz arrived just in time. The male lead also took the opportunity to escape. Liz stepped forward to block his path. He grabbed the captain's arm. He stopped the captain's hand, which was about to attack again. Then, Liz glared fiercely at the captain, warning him. The captain was startled by Liz. He had thought he was just an ordinary young master. He didn't expect he could summon companions. He even wondered if the male lead used some kind of magic. The male lead had an innocent expression. However, more than one came. Ligia appeared right behind them. The male lead didn't expect that so many people could fit into this small restroom. Ligia walked straight towards the captain. To put it bluntly, since you've acted so rudely, it's only natural that you won't accept our commission. You mean, sir? The male lead was greatly surprised. He could only tell the team leader's identity because he had the appraisal skill. But how did Ligia know? Faced with Licia's threat, the captain's tone revealed a hint of disdain. As long as he used his full strength, he could choose to kill the male lead and escape. Unlike the male lead's panic, Lisha remained calm and collected. This was simply because as long as Liz was here, even escaping alone would be difficult for the captain. But everything's been said, the team leader still chooses not to accept the commission. Ligia is angry too. If what the team leader just said really happens, if the male lead is killed, she will chase the team leader to the ends of the earth, and end his life with her own hands. Looking at the ferocious Ligia, the leader wisely chose to surrender. He also apologized for his rudeness. But before discussing important matters, he wanted to know how his true identity had been discovered. The male lead frankly stated that he possessed an appraisal skill that allowed him to see others' abilities. This left the leader half believing, half doubting. Only when the male lead called out the name he had abandoned, did the squadron leader have to believe him. He is now called Fam, and he even knows his own name. The male lead's abilities are practically his nemesis. Before the male lead could even explain the request, the squadron leader accepted it, simply because Liz, this Malga, is exceptionally strong. And he has the nerve to take on a job that's beyond his age. Of course, I'll choose the profitable side. Then I'll call a few people to discuss it inside. But how did Liz and Lisha discover the captain's true identity? Lisha noticed it from the terrified expression on the waiter's face when the male lead saw him. Then he consulted with Liz. And they chased after them together. I have to say, Ligia's ability to read the room is truly impressive. Then they entered the house. The male lead explained the details of the commission to the captain, investigating the reasons why Purina County refused to be brought under the influence. He thought it would take a month. After all, even the county sheriff of Rumer couldn't find the reason. But the time limit given by the captain surprised the protagonist. The 5-day investigation deadline had arrived, and what surprised the protagonist was that the commission was completed by the captain alone. The protagonist then realized that he possessed unparalleled personal strength. This also explained why the other party, despite having low commandership, was able to become a squadron leader. But the male protagonist was very curious how the other party managed to investigate in such a short time. He found out. But this was obviously a trade secret. The squadron leader couldn't reveal it. However, through investigation, the squadron leader discovered a covenant. It has the signatures and seals of the nobles who followed Lord Mark. Each family that signed received a copy. The Purina County was among them. But what surprised Liz was that it even had the signature of Masa County. Maysar County, like the protagonist's territory, is located in the west. It has a large population. It rivals the state capital, Arkantis. It's one of the few cities on the continent with its own military force. Regardless of which side it joins, it will have a huge impact on both sides. Fortunately, Maysar County is on the same side as the protagonist. They all follow Lord Colin. But this pact with Mark bears the signature of Masa County. In other words, if this pact is real, it means Masa County will switch sides at the last minute. In that case, even if Rummel attacks Purina, as soon as Masa County moves, the encirclement will collapse. They might even be attacked from two sides, and ultimately suffer a crushing defeat. If that happens, the battle will turn in Mark's favor. Purina County should have judged that following Colin would definitely be the loser in the end. However, Liz doubted the authenticity of this covenant, despite the captain claiming it was a trade secret. But something this important shouldn't be so easily obtained. The captain said it was just a means to an end. No matter how much you trust someone, you can't say for sure. He can only tell the male lead and Liz, this truly comes from Purina, the town where the Purina County mayor resides. It's something from that city. Seeing the leader so firm, Liz also chose to believe the leader. Then the male lead prepared to settle the commission fee, but the leader refused to accept it. Of course, not because the male lead is ugly, but rather, it's an apology for the last incident and an investment in the future. The male lead looked bewildered after hearing this. He didn't understand the implication in the captain's words. But right now, the male lead clearly wouldn't care about these things. He eagerly wanted to report this to Rummel. But the male lead didn't know things weren't so simple. When they arrived at Kanar City, Rummel was also extremely shocked to learn that Masa County had followed Mark. He was greatly astonished. It was only because the Masa County lord had always spoken highly of his eldest son, Karan. He held him in high regard. If this document is real, winning over Purina County will not be a simple matter. Otherwise, Hay will inevitably encounter a heavier blow than expected. Just as they were about to go to Karan to discuss this, Renard suddenly discovered something suspicious about this pact. He compared the seal and signature of the Earl of Masa in previous letters. At first glance, it seemed genuine, but the shape of the circle was somewhat strange. The signatures are also different. Could it be that the covenant, the signature and seal from Masa County are forged? In other words, Purina was deceived by false intelligence from the Masa County rebellion. That's why he followed Mark, the second son. The main character didn't expect Renard to have this kind of ability. His appraisal skills can see, but their abilities can't be measured by standard means. He still can't use the appraisal results to judge a person's abilities. But the male lead doesn't understand why the other party would fabricate such a lie that will eventually be exposed. Liz guesses this is probably to buy time. Roselle thinks the same. Roselle explains if they attack Purina, Purina will naturally fight back. But because of the disparity in combat strength, Purina will eventually fall. Therefore, the other side is likely trying to gain the time Purina remains on their side. Purina is very likely their expendable pawn. The enemy might have other plans. Rommel immediately realized that their target was likely the explosive magic stones in Michiana State. It's a very rare magic stone. Exploding magic stones, once processed, can cast powerful magic. They can also be used to create powerful weapons. The second son, Mark, controls Purina County in order to collect as many exploding magic stones as possible. Roselle spoke from the side. We've now lost the option of attacking Purina. Purina should have been our ally. If internal strife weakens our forces, we'll only be playing into the enemy's hands. So now I can only tell Purina the truth, and make them our true allies. But Rommel has sent envoys to Purina many times, and they've refused each time. Just as everyone was grappling with this difficult problem, Roselle quickly devised a countermeasure. He asked the male protagonist to write a letter to the governor of Purina as a lord, informing him that he was aware of the terms of the alliance, and the content of the Moonlit Pact, and expressing his intention to follow the second son, Mark. After receiving the letter, the governor of Purina quickly granted the male lead an audience. The male lead also stated his intentions. As the letter said, because of Massa County's defection, he found myself considering joining the younger son Mark's faction. After all, a force like Massa County is a crucial factor in determining the outcome of the war. As a small lord like myself, he naturally want to follow the side with a greater chance of winning. Pereira, the county magistrate, looked at the new lord before him. Though still young, he was quite capable. He could even steal his own confidential documents. In that case, he will intercede with Mark for him. He let the male lead join. But the male lead wanted to confirm one thing first. The issue is the authenticity of the covenant. County Magistrate Purina insists the covenant was given by Mark himself. The protagonist continues to press. Why did Massa County betray Lord Karan? The other party claims betraying comrades for victory in war is commonplace. The protagonist doesn't stop pointing out that Massa County knowingly betrayed them and risked being surrounded is still following Lord Mark. Something's fishy here. To believe others without evidence, isn't that a bit reckless? The speechless Governor Purina realized something was wrong. The male lead is most likely a spy. He decisively ordered the soldiers to arrest the male lead and his companions. All the soldiers dared to not come forward. At this time, another person beside the male lead also took off his cloak, revealing his true identity. It was the Massa County magistrate himself. It turned out the male lead's trip wasn't rash. The male lead had already confirmed with the Massa County magistrate beforehand about the content of the alliance and the authenticity of the signature. It confirmed the signature was forged. The male lead also confessed his plan to feign defection, using the opportunity to reveal the truth to the Purina County magistrate. He hoped the Massa County magistrate would write a letter proving the pact was forged. However, the Massa County magistrate could not forgive the despicable act of forging the pact. He wanted to clear up the misunderstanding personally. The Earl of Massa declares that he never signed the covenant. The covenant is a forgery, and that he would absolutely never betray Lord Karan, the eldest son. To clarify the truth of the matter, Earl Purina naturally chose again to follow Lord Karan. And all this is thanks to the male lead. He didn't let the enemy's scheme succeed. More importantly, he resolved the matter without bloodshed. The Massa County magistrate praised the male lead highly, and it was because of this matter that Lord Karan requested a meeting with him. And it's now. This sudden summons left the male lead flustered. He never expected that he, such a weak lord, would actually get to see Lord Karan. It's like a village head meeting the governor. This is so sudden. He hasn't even prepared a gift or anything. But Liz and Roselle are very excited. This is a great opportunity to advance oneself. It's also the perfect time to gather information on their allies. He encouraged the male lead to seize this opportunity. After a 2-day journey, they finally arrived at St. Pra City. That night, Rommel took the male lead to a party hosted by Lord Karan. The lords from the surrounding areas of St. Pra City were also present, and the powerful nobles. This made the male lead extremely nervous. Fortunately, Rommel noticed the male lead's nervousness and took the initiative to introduce him to everyone, allowing him to relax. At this time, a trumpet sounded. Everyone immediately turned in the same direction and bowed uniformly. It turned out to be Lord Karan's arrival. In the moment he looked up, the male lead activated his appraisal skill and discovered that Lord Karan's ability values were extremely high. He was indeed an outstanding talent fit to rule a country. He also understood why Rommel was so steadfast in following Charon. But the male lead suddenly remembered the rumors that the second son, Mark, was even more outstanding than Charon. This piqued the protagonist's curiosity about Mark's abilities. But soon, the protagonist realized he couldn't simply look at ability scores. The struggle for inheritance was inevitably full of conspiracies. Mark's excellence as the second son might not be solely due to his abilities. Perhaps some people, with a certain intention, had elevated him to such heights. At the same time, they will deliberately belittle Lord Charon. The waters here are unfathomably deep. He must be extremely careful. Then Charon began to speak. First of all, because of the death of his father, the state of Mysian fell into a huge crisis. My younger brother, Mark, declared war on me, the rightful heir. But even so, the country won't take action. Because this country, over 200 years old, its regime is corrupt. It's beyond repair now. Changing an era involves destruction and rebirth. An outdated and decaying country must be destroyed to build a new one. Therefore, I believe I can win the war against Mark. Unify the Mysian region. Establish a new nation. The male protagonist finally understands Lord Charon's intentions. Then Charon praised the talented people present, and encouraged everyone to work together to achieve victory together. These inspiring words ignited the passion of everyone present. Then Lord Charon invited the male protagonist forward, and the male protagonist exposed Mark's conspiracy, peacefully resolving the issue of recruiting in Parina County. Led by Rommel, the other nobles and lords offered applause. Then, led by Rommel, the male protagonist began to greet everyone. In just 2.5 minutes, he looked completely haggard. Then he shakily went outside for some air. But before he could relax, Charon appeared beside him. He jumped back in fright. It turned out Charon just wanted to talk to him privately, because he had heard that the man's retainers were performing exceptionally well. Furthermore, Rommel rarely praises others in front of him. It seems the male lead is not only excellent, his judgment of people is also quite good. Therefore, he wants to ask the male lead if his subordinates are all outstanding. But recalling the banquet, through observation, he didn't find anyone particularly outstanding. The male lead was a little flustered, but after a moment of hesitation, he told the truth. He frankly admitted that he hadn't found any exceptionally talented individuals. Charon's expression changed instantly. Hearing the male lead's straightforward answer, Charon didn't get angry, but instead burst out laughing. Although my subordinates are all serious and good people full of fighting spirit, their abilities are really unsatisfactory. It's difficult to win this war relying on them. Mark's camp has many intelligent people. Although I have the upper hand in terms of troops and finances, it's meaningless if the leader isn't excellent. But it's precisely because of this. Hearing how the male lead properly handled the Parina County issue, he felt very relieved. He is very happy to see the emergence of new talent. If they win this battle and he lives up to expectations, then he will promote the male lead to the county governor of Kanar County. The male lead thought he had misheard. Until Charon stressed again that he would promote him, the male lead's expression was priceless. A village head from the countryside suddenly became a mayor. That's quite a leap. But since Director Charon has such high hopes for him, he can't let him down. But before leaving, Charon had one more request. That is, to have the male lead give his retainers to him. Of course, the male lead refused. Charon didn't force him. He simply asked the male lead to bring his retainers to the next war council meeting. He wanted to hear their opinions. He also asked the male lead to use his discerning eyes to help him find some outstanding talents. Meanwhile, in Alcanta City, Lord Mark also held a meeting. Although the plot to turn Parina County failed, but now, they have gathered far more magic stones than expected. They can start the war immediately. Besides Lord Charon, the enemy lacks of outstanding commanders. They shouldn't lose to them. But Mark wasn't satisfied with that. He bluntly stated that he only fought wars he was sure to win. The win rate had to be 100%. So he decided to reconcile with his retainer, Thomas's sister, Miller. Thomas immediately retorted, "How could that person become a retainer? Although she's quite capable, right now she's just a drunken waste. No noble would hire her." Mark finally breathed a sigh of relief. After the male lead returned to his territory, he immediately found Pham and commissioned him to help find talent. On his way back, the male lead was accidentally knocked to the ground by someone hurrying along. He fell to the ground. Although the other person helped him up, Liz still felt annoyed. But seeing that the other person was a drunkard, he didn't pursue it. This drunkard stumbled into Pham's tavern. As soon as she entered, she wanted to ask the madam to hire her to work here. Before the madam could speak, the shop assistant saw Mireille and was greatly surprised. They were old acquaintances who often drank together. Seeing Mireille trying to take advantage of the situation, the shop assistant certainly didn't want to hire a drunkard. Then they were going to fire Mireille. But Pham agreed. But how can a drunkard do their job properly? She didn't just deliver the wrong orders to customers, she was secretly drinking on the job. She even knocked over dishes. In short, she was constantly hindering business. But Mireille showed no shame whatsoever. When the store closed, after a friendly exchange between Femme and Mireille, Femme learned that Mireille and her brother had previously served a certain old gentleman, but recently heard that he had passed away. Although the old man was sometimes confused, he was a fun person. And the old gentleman was very optimistic about their abilities. Upon learning the old gentleman's name was Armand, Femme and the clerk were both shocked. Wasn't he the former governor of Missian State? The clerk thought Mireille was bragging. But Femme sensed something. So the next day, he recommended them to the male protagonist. The male protagonist was both surprised and excited. After all, it's been less than a day and he's already found the excellent talent he was looking for. But upon meeting Mireille, the male lead was shocked. Wasn't this the drunkard who bumped into him yesterday? Although he had some hesitation, since it was Femme's recommendation, he decided to assess her first. The male lead initially thought there was a problem with his appraisal skills. However, he wasn't the only one shocked. When Liz learned her name was Mireille, her reaction was extremely intense. Upon learning that Mireille was the former governor of Mission's chief of staff, Liz vehemently opposed taking him as a retainer. It was simply because he had heard that Guranjan's sister had a notorious reputation. She was once a staff officer for the former governor-general of Missian, but she was later expelled. And more importantly, Mireille has a brother, Thomas, who is a capable assistant to the enemy general, Lord Mark. There might be secret communication between them. Mireille suddenly laughed, saying it was impossible for her to collude with that fool. He and she don't get along. Liz clearly doesn't believe what Mireille said. But unexpectedly, the male lead insists on hiring Mireille. He doesn't know what aspect her ambition will affect. It's impossible to determine whether she's likely to betray her employer. But the male lead believes that ability is paramount, even if it means taking some risks. The male lead also wants Mireille to become his retainer, because she's truly a rare talent. However, less than 2.5 days later, Liz reached his limit with Mireille's behavior. It's because she ignores her work every day, sleeping soundly in her room during the day. Even when assigned to the training grounds for instruction, many soldiers reported that she lacked enthusiasm and drive. Even if he tried to reason with her, hoping she'd change her attitude, she showed no remorse whatsoever. She even used "sometimes you just have to follow your mood" as an excuse to brush it off. Liz thought that Mireille was a detrimental presence to the Robert family. His anger has reached its peak. Not only that, but Roselle also came crying to complain about Mireille. He doesn't want Mireille to teach him anymore, because Mireille doesn't let him read. Instead, she takes him outside to run. When asked about her reasoning, Mireille only gave an inexplicable answer, and let him think for himself. Roselle felt he'd been tricked, because he wasn't good at sports. And he didn't understand how this helped with strategy or tactics. Instead, he felt exhausted, both physically and mentally. Just then, a loud bang suddenly came from outside. Everyone was panicked. Thinking it was a sudden enemy attack, they all prepared for battle. But it turned out to be Charlotte demonstrating magic. Needless to say, it was because of Mireille again. Her actions caused the soldiers to grumble. But she shamelessly said, "This is just who I am. I'm this old already." Her nature is hard to change. It made them grit their teeth in anger. The male lead was anxious and worried, but he had to state his position. He hoped everyone could unite. If Mireille continues to act as she pleases, there will definitely be problems. He thought Mireille would just leave. After all, Femme said she likes traveling everywhere. Now everyone has a problem with her. She probably wouldn't want to stay. Unexpectedly, Mireille said she didn't want to leave, because since that old gentleman, the male lead is the second person to sincerely accept her. After thinking for a moment, Mireille continued, "Should we do a simulated battle? If she performs well, she will stay as a retainer. After all, one's strength can only be brought into play in actual combat." Liz strongly agrees. He also wants to see how strong the new governor of Mission staff is. Why wait? Let's do it today. An exciting simulated battle is about to begin. Lisha learns the news in a letter. She comes to cheer the male protagonist on. Before setting off, the male protagonist explains the rules of the competition in detail. 50 people per team, the battlefield is set near the eastern forest. The time limit is set at sunset. The victory condition is to defeat more soldiers. If you can capture the enemy general, or if the entire enemy army is annihilated, it's immediately judged a win. To be safe, we'll use wooden swords that aren't sharpened. A hit to the head or chest, or other vital areas will be an instant disqualification. Furthermore, the use of fire attribute magic is prohibited, because using it would instantly decide the victor. But sound magic is permitted. Although sound magic cannot attack, if used properly, it can play a strategic role. However, during team formation, excluding the male protagonist, everyone else actually ran over to the Liz team. Given that Mireille would have to leave if she lost the match, the soldiers decided to assign new recruits to Mireille's team. Originally, the main character wanted her to say a few words to boost morale, but unexpectedly, she was drinking again. This should have been a good opportunity for everyone to accept her. But now, it feels like the gap between her and the team is growing wider. The male lead is also at his wit's end. He's also worried about losing the match now. After all, the other team has Liz. But Mireille is brimming with confidence. She frankly points out that compared to our opponents, we're all rookies. If we clash head-on, we're definitely outmatched in terms of combat power. However, she firmly believed that combat strength wasn't the only factor determining victory or defeat. Strategy was limitless. She acknowledged her opponent's strength and her team's shortcomings in coordination. But she also pointed out that these apparent weaknesses, viewed from a different perspective, were actually a form of trust. She said it didn't matter if some people hated her, because a strategist's job isn't to be liked, but to lead the army to victory. She encouraged the newcomers, saying, "They sent you here because they think you're weak. The opponents here are indeed strong. But sometimes, you can surprise even those outstanding predecessors. Let them be amazed." Mireille's words surprised everyone. They felt both nervous and excited. They looked forward to the upcoming simulated battle. As for Team Liz, they speculated that Team Mireille wouldn't engage in a direct confrontation. They might launch a surprise attack or use long-range weapons. So, as usual, they'll split into two squads. Liz leads half the soldiers ahead. Roselle leads the other half. Maintain a certain distance and follow behind. If anything happens, use sound magic to notify Liz's squad. We're faster than the enemy. We can definitely arrive before Roselle's squad is defeated. And counterattack. Although the strategy seems simple, it's the most effective way to deal with the weak. A frontal assault is the answer. Finally, Liz addressed the soldiers. "We've all fought on the battlefield, and this time will be no different. We will win as always." However, the Liz team hadn't gone far when they suddenly heard a strange noise ahead. They immediately became alert, thinking it was a trap set by the enemy. But unexpectedly, emerging from the bushes was Mireille team's magician. Even more surprisingly, he wanted to defect and join the Liz team, and said they would reveal Mireille's team's plan completely. Liz was full of doubt, but thought it wouldn't hurt to listen. The plan is this. First, have the soldiers shout loudly, pretending there's a real enemy attack, to lure Liz's team over. Then, launch a surprise attack with the remaining forces. The Liz soldiers said it was impossible. If someone attacked, even if it was a trap, we would have to go and check. Although training didn't explicitly state that this method couldn't be used, but in their view, this action went beyond the scope of normal training. Liz also thought it was impossible. Mireille, though eloquent, couldn't possibly convince the male lead to accept such a plan. However, unexpectedly, the magician directly admitted that all these plans were a deception. Mireille had him pretend to be a traitor to mislead everyone. Liz asked him why he would become an enemy. Frankly, the magician said it's because he dislikes Mireille. She's always late for training, and she pushes all the chores onto him. She never seriously does any work herself. I know I shouldn't dislike a comrade, but I also swore loyalty to the male lead. Therefore, I can't tolerate her idleness. The magician then revealed Mireille's true plan. She planned to send herself to lead the Liz team to the location. Then she'll pretend to turn her back on you. When they attack, she'll use sound magic to create chaos. Mireille and the others will then counterattack. Along with the male protagonist hiding in the shadows, they attacked him from both sides. The mage hoped Liz would pretend to fall for it. As long as he didn't use sound magic, Mireille wouldn't get hurt. However, Liz wasn't so easily fooled. He pretended to agree, first letting the mage hand over the catalyst, then ordering his capture. He thought the mage's flashy catalyst was suspicious. There's definitely more to it than meets the eye. Sure enough, the soldiers found another catalyst on the mage. Another catalyst. It seems the mage originally planned to use the map to reveal Mireille's possible location to Liz. Once Liz's team is lured to the designated location, he would use the hidden catalyst on his person to activate sound magic. Now things will be much easier. Without magical communication, they won't send troops here. This is the perfect opportunity for us to attack. We can take them completely by surprise. Quickly, Liz's team arrived at the location marked on the map. And sure enough, they saw Mireille's team's soldiers. Liz ordered the soldiers to quietly disperse, preparing to encircle them. However, when they drew closer, they were stunned. Only Mireille and the male lead were there, and those soldiers were all decoys. The male lead never expected this hard-drinking older sister to be such a talented and resourceful person. Not only is she incredibly intelligent, but her physical strength is astonishing. Episode 12, Oath. Even the terrifying Black Death Liz couldn't catch her after chasing her for 9 blocks. Seeing the pursuers closing in, the situation was urgent, but Mireille remained calm and composed. Just as the pursuers thought they had her, she gave a sly smile. Immediately, she calmly triggered the trap she had set beforehand. The next second, the soldiers at the front fell to the ground unprepared, one after another. Following that, the soldiers behind also fell victim, one after another. The male protagonist couldn't help but admire Mirei's skill. It was all part of her plan. However, all the traps were ineffective against Liz. It's time for the trump card. The male lead and Mirei quickly put on earplugs. Then they threw several sonic magic spells behind them. The pursuers behind them were stunned dizzy by the sudden noise. By the time they recovered, Mirei and the male lead were nowhere to be seen. However, Liz is known as the black-faced Grim Reaper for a reason. He quickly discovered their whereabouts. A new round of pursuit began. Mirei was starting to tire. She only hoped the team members would send a signal soon so they could implement the next plan. Meanwhile, Roselle's team heard the sound of approaching footsteps from the other side of the forest. Charlotte suggested they quicken their pace and shorten the prearranged distance, but Roselle had a different opinion. He thought the hurried footsteps. It's highly likely that Liz and her team suddenly accelerated. They must have encountered an emergency. Therefore, Roselle argued that the squad should increase their distance from them. Just then, Mirei's team spotted Roselle's squad. The mage immediately sent a signal using sound magic. They saw that only half of the opposing soldiers were present. Roselle guessed that the other half of the soldiers must be dealing with the Liz team. This meant reinforcements wouldn't arrive immediately. With roughly equal numbers, his own squad was stronger, so he decisively ordered his soldiers to engage. However, unexpectedly, the other half of Mirei's team also suddenly appeared. Seeing the unfavorable situation, the best strategy is to retreat. So Charlotte dragged Roselle and ran desperately. However, Roselle, who usually only studied and didn't exercise, was out of breath after running only a short distance. Seeing this, Charlotte quickly threw a sound magic spell, but she didn't cover her ears, and ended up being knocked unconscious herself. At this time, the soldiers behind caught up. Roselle could only desperately run forward alone. It was precisely when Charlotte threw the sonic magic that the loud bang let Mirei know Roselle's location. Liz also guessed the same, only he was puzzled. According to the previous plan, the Roselle squad should be far away from him. How come they're so close now? Liz suddenly realized something. Could it be Mirei? She ran towards Roselle from the very beginning. At this moment, he had only one belief. As the protagonist's bodyguard, I must not lose to that person. I have to beat her. So he increased his speed. Liz's relentless pursuit was also a headache for Mirei. This was the first time she had ever encountered someone as fast as her. Now it's a race to see who's faster. Luckily, she ran into Roselle before the 2.5-minute mark. Roselle was quite surprised to see him, but he didn't have time to think about it. Mirei saw the target had appeared, so she had the male lead throw a sound magic at Liz, then charged towards Roselle. Liz quickly followed. The former governor of Mission's chief of staff truly lived up to their reputation. Mirei's soldiers rejoiced. Their team, composed entirely of rookies, actually managed to win. It's simply unbelievable. The lead soldiers, however, were resentful. They believed the other team had won using underhanded tactics. They thought they should have won in a fair fight. After hearing this, Liz immediately told them that there is no such word as despicable on the battlefield. Even though we believed ourselves to be stronger, losing is losing. There are no excuses. We should accept this result. Roselle also agrees. Liz believes that while Mirei's attitude is difficult to accept, she ignited the soldiers' latent potential. Ultimately, they won. Look at how happy they are. You know this isn't something everyone can do. Then Liz apologized to his soldiers for failing to lead them to victory. Then he went to Mirei. Honestly, although I am not happy about it, we were completely defeated. Your abilities are unquestionable. I apologize for my previous rudeness. Roselle also stated that he finally understands now why Mirei usually lets him run around, and hopes Mirei will continue to guide him. The male lead thought Mirei would be smug about this, but unexpectedly, she also knows how to appreciate others. First, she expressed her admiration for Liz. Your strength is truly formidable. I really didn't expect to be pursued so relentlessly. Then she expressed surprise to Russell. I never expected you to think of creating distance from Liz and the others midway. That was completely unexpected. It made me anxious in the end. Finally, Mirei looked at the male protagonist, meaningfully saying that he can recruit them as his retainers. He is the most amazing. A lord from the countryside, to actually find such outstanding talents. What exactly are your intentions? The male lead responds rather calmly. At first, I merely wish to establish a powerful territory that will not be defeated in war. But now I want to create a place where children can live happily. Mirei thought for a moment after hearing this, and continued to ask. In other words, it's best if there's no war? The male lead nodded in agreement. Mirei suddenly said something surprising. Then you'll have to become this country's king, won't you? The male lead was shocked. You mean the Emperor? I've never even considered that, Mireille said firmly. Then start working towards it now. You can definitely succeed.